Hello, I'm back with you again today to talk about something a little bit different as it relates to flying. And this is dedicated to people who might be a little bit nervous if flying is a new endeavor of yours. There are 7 basic human senses. You've got sight, touch, smell, taste, balance, body awareness, and the last one, the 7th one we're going to talk about today, is hearing, auditory hearing. For first-time flyers or folks new to aviation, just as passengers, there are a lot of things you're going to hear. And sometimes the unknown will give feelings of fear and trepidation. And there's no real reason for that. So I just want to take a couple of minutes and talk about some things that you may hear as a passenger that you shouldn't be alarmed about, but are actually quite normal. The biggest thing that you'll listen to, I think, is when the airplane is still on the ground while they're loading. The way the airplanes work is that you're moving large pieces of metal, doors that may weigh hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds, and this is done through electrical and hydraulic controls. So you'll hear the cargo doors opening and closing sometimes, and there's typically a motor that makes this happen. And it may be a high-pitched whine. It's totally normal. When the airplane is being loaded, you'll hear the bags being thrown on sometimes, depending on where you're sitting. But those are just bags being loaded. In more modern airplanes, they may not toss them physically. They may come up on a conveyor. So as airplanes have evolved over time, the sound insulation has improved tremendously, and there are a lot of things you don't hear. So for the most part, it is pretty quiet. The cabins are well insulated. But on the ground, you hear some other things, particularly for Airbus airplanes. You may hear a kind of a whining noise, a little whining noise or something resembling a dog barking. And oftentimes that will occur really after the engine is started, and they've just started one engine, but they have one hydraulic system that's powering the entire airplane. And there's, to balance the hydraulic systems out, there's usually a power transfer unit, at least in Airbus airplanes. There's a power transfer unit that will try to balance those hydraulics. And when you hear that, what you think is a barking dog, that's just a power transfer unit trying to balance all the hydraulics of all the systems on the airplane. So it's nothing to be concerned about. Nothing is breaking. You'll hear that on taxi out. And oftentimes they will start one airplane. They will start one engine and taxi on one engine to save fuel. And they'll start the other engine, obviously, before takeoff. So you hear this little barking thing all the time, periodically. Don't try to time it. The system takes care of itself. Another thing you'll hear on the ground are a series of dings. These are little pleasant dings like a doorbell. And that's basically an alerting system that the cockpit uses to communicate with the cabin crew in the back. And sometimes the cabin crew uses those same dings to communicate with each other. So after takeoff, you may hear, 1 ding, 2 dings. Sometimes that's from the cockpit to signal the flight attendants or the cabin crew that it's okay to get out of their seats and serve. There's another one that comes on oftentimes when the gear is retracted. You may hear a series of things where they're communicating with each other. So don't let that bother you. That's just think of it as a doorbell. It doesn't involve you. On takeoff, the first thing you're going to hear that's going to be loud really is the retraction of the landing gear. Retraction and the extension. But the retraction, most of the airplanes, the landing gear doors are closed for the most part. So for the gear to come up, a number of doors will open up. They'll open up, the gear will retract, then the doors will close. It's kind of a 3-step process. Now, what do the landing gear doors weigh? They weigh a lot. So you'll hear clunks with latches engaged, hydraulic pumps bringing the landing gear up. The landing gear, say on a 777 aircraft, can be, up to 32,000 pounds. So you're moving a lot of metal. So it takes a lot of energy to do that and a lot of power, and you may hear some clunks and thumps. That's okay. You want the gear to be latched up. I had a case one time and raised the landing gear on a MD-11, and one of them didn't come up, which caused a problem, in the cockpit, but we were able to work it out and get it up. But it's actually a complex movement, just raising and lowering the landing gear. Anyway, so you'll hear that clump. The whirring sound sometimes will come from the retraction of flaps and slats. For the most part, you don't hear that much now. In the older airplanes, like a 727 and DC-9, you'd hear the flaps coming up, and it's like a long, drawn-out process, like something from the Middle Ages. That's almost silent now because you have electric pumps that, electric motors that will operate and bring things up pretty quietly. So you shouldn't hear the flight change of the flight sounds related to the change of the flight controls. Engine power settings. When we take off, we typically have a high thrust rating set. The airplane needs a lot of power to get its weight off the ground and get airborne. So the maximum amount of power is typically going to be used on takeoff. As the airplane climbs up and less power is needed, you may hear the power come back. And sometimes it gets silent. It may get eerily silent, where you think, gee, have the engines quit? No, the power has just come back, and that's enough to sustain its flight where it is. Typically, you'll get that when you have a takeoff. They may level off at a lower altitude to bring the power back, and then be cleared for a higher altitude, and the power will come up, and you'll hear maybe some of the engine noise. Often, you don't hear the engine noise. For the most part, what you're listening to is the air conditioning system. As the thrust varies, the noise from the air conditioning units changes a little bit. You're listening to that for the most part, but you're okay. None of these sounds really mean any kind of danger. They're little things that happen, and while you're in flight, you really won't hear anything because they're not moving the flaps and slats. They're not moving the landing gear. Typically, your biggest sound, your sensory inputs, are going to come in the takeoff phase and landing. In landing, the biggest thing you'll hear is probably when the gear are lowered. Same thing happens again. Gear handle is lowered down, the door is open, the landing gear comes down. You may hear the interlocks hit, and then the doors close again. And that's all you should hear until the airplane touches the ground, and it's pretty obvious at that point. So you'll hear a few sights and sounds. Don't be alarmed. If the crew's not alarmed, you shouldn't be alarmed. By the way, this is not part of it, but what the pilots hear is something totally different. In the cockpit, there are a large number of warnings and cautions and things that speak literally to you, that warn of dangerous situations to the flight crew if they occur. Now, you won't hear any of that. That's not audible. That's just audible inside of the cockpit. And there are hundreds of alarms and alerts that can possibly come up. Anyway, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. That's for the air crew. And also, the air crew really doesn't hear what you're hearing in the back there. Most of the airplanes are pretty big, so we all have our sights and sounds that we have to deal with and respond to. So as a passenger, just sit back, relax, keep your seatbelt fastened, as they say, and enjoy the ride.